Okay, today I'd like to talk about alternate picking patterns and how to make them more interesting, how to make them more difficult, and how to bulletproof them against all the things that might happen during a live improvisation or just generally during a live solo or trying to cover someone else's song. Now, we make quite a lot of mistakes when it comes to learning how to alternate pick, and these are really common and not talked about that often, so I thought I'd cover it in a video. When it comes to learning alternate picking patterns, people often fragment them too much, or they fragment them in really specific ways, which doesn't necessarily help you when you need to be able to do things in reverse or do things with a little bit more flexibility. I'll show you what I mean. If I take, let's say, a classic Paul Gilbert pattern. And everyone's probably heard that by now. Loads of YouTubers have covered this, and you've probably listened to all those records. Everyone does this in their solos quite a lot. But quite often how people will practice this is just to do it the one way like that, starting on a downstroke. And if you do that, then anytime you maybe want to play that pattern on a different beat in the bar, or every time you want to play that pattern starting on an upstroke for whatever reason, you're not going to be able to do it because it's a completely different set of problems for your muscle memory to solve. So when you're taking a pattern like that, very simply, make sure you can do this. If I'm playing it one way, make sure I can also just do that with an upstroke. And make sure you get those two relatively to the same level. If you don't do that, you're not going to have the versatility that a lot of people are going to have with their alternate picking who have done the extra legwork there. So be very careful about practicing things lazily like that. Now, the other thing I was going to mention here is this pretty much applies to any pattern we can have. So, if I'm doing something like, pentatonic work, for example, I want to be able to do that starting on a downstroke. I also want to be able to go on an upstroke. There's no excuse for not having both of those down. If you're practicing your picking, you should have both of those to a relatively decent level if that is what you're trying to practice at the moment. If you find one of those particularly difficult, that often shows you that you have a particular problem with either inside or outside picking. Some people prefer one over the other and find the other very counterintuitive. And that means you need to really go away and work on whichever one is your weakest Achilles heel as such. So make sure you're practicing any line like this. We are doing them starting on a downstroke and doing them starting on an upstroke. Now, the next thing you can do, and this one is incredibly hard. So if you find that maybe you're picking really fluently at quite high BPMs, and then you can't do this exercise at all, that's very common because this one is really tricky. But adding a odd numbered pattern to your alternate picked line really throws things off in a quite awkward way, and it makes it really hard to be able to adjust your picking on the fly to what you've just done. I'll give you a good example. If we take the same Paul Gilbert idea, very simple, this one. If I take that and now just double up, like that. So what I'm doing there is I'm doubling up the 3-note per string bit into 6 notes. So what happens is on every repeat, this changes. If I start it here, I go down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down. And then we come back, and then we start on an upstroke. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So the first time round, that was an inside string change, and then the second time round, that's an outside string change. On repeat, you are changing those every time you do a repetition of that pattern. That is about 100 times harder than the first lick. So you can imagine if you start practicing things like this, they'll really assist you on trying to get your alternate picking patterns under control and being a little bit more flexible with what you can do with them. Now, the second thing this does for you, which is really important, is that that ends up as an odd numbered pattern in terms of the number of notes you're playing as well. So that means that when I do this to a metronome, it sort of phases. It doesn't repeat in nice chunks like a lot of these other patterns do, which is a great way of practicing your time and getting used to playing some of these patterns on offbeats or on, you know, different places in the bar. Maybe it's the first time round it starts on 1, but then when it repeats, it starts on 2 and then when it repeats again, it starts on 4 and 3 and 4 and, like we're going around like that. And it doesn't quite repeat where you want it to, when you do that over and over again, which means you're getting used to using odd numbers of notes in melodic ideas. And that's a really underrated thing to be practicing, because a lot of interesting playing, whenever you see someone doing something super formulaic, it's mostly because it's rhythmically formulaic, and interesting playing is rhythmically interesting. So if you're using groups of 5, groups of 9, groups of 11, all of these kind of things, they start to get you out of these really basic boxes that a lot of guitarists find themselves in terms of the melodic ideas that they can come up with. So that was one example of that. I'll show you another one, which is the one I did in the intro. And again, just to give you an idea of how to construct these, all you're doing is adding an odd numbered grouping to whatever even numbered group you normally do. So my even numbered group was going up in 4s and then coming back down like this. That was the even numbered group. But now what I'm going to do is on the repeat, I'm going to add a 5 notes to that. So I get this. And you can see I'm adding that 5-note group on to the end of the first pattern, which then throws the pick stroke off for the entire thing. So I start on a downstroke here. I do this. Downstroke. Now starting on an upstroke. Now starting on a downstroke again. Starting on an upstroke again. So you get the idea. That then makes that pattern, again, 100 times harder than the original, which was, once you've got it down, the muscle memory doesn't have to change and adapt to the different rhythms that you're putting in there. So you can do this in a more complicated way like that and take quite a long alternate picking idea and then just throw in a pattern of 3 or a pattern of 5 on the end of it to shift the whole thing back to an upstroke or back to a downstroke, instead of having it repeat the same way every single time. Very simple concept, incredibly difficult to master and incredibly difficult to do at any kind of speed. So this is not necessarily going to be a speed exercise for a lot of people. It's more to address the weaknesses in your own playing. And so make sure that if one of these is very difficult, or any of these exercises are particularly difficult, then you are targeting those upstroke starting licks, or those inside string changing licks that you're not comfortable with, because that's going to really make the most improvement to your alternate picking. Now, if there are any questions on this, do let me know in the comments. But otherwise, I've written out a big sheet of all of these different patterns, some really nasty things for you to practice, which will be available on the members area on my YouTube channel. So if you're interested in that, check that out. Otherwise, I will catch you in the next video.